Hey guys, Blank here, the king of ideas and too lazy to make a script for one of these videos, bringing you another rant video about my favorite list of games, a 3x3. I love 3x3s, but I hate looking at other people 3x3s, so I'm gonna explain my own, starting with Daricia. I don't feel like gathering footage for all these games because that's too time consuming. Anyway, starting with Theracia, there's a lot that could be said about this game, and a lot of it would be me gushing about how Kaga is a genius, and he is. Uh, Theracia in specific, uh, first of all, I wanna preface this by saying the Fire Emblem games previously, leading up to this, I feel like Kaga has been always trying to one up himself. He's always been experimenting with strategy RPGs and integrating RPG mechanics and mechanics from other games into it. And I feel like Dericia is the trifecta of all that combined into one game. A lot of strategies in this game revolve around the enemy rather than the player. The player is always adapting to new situations with which coincides with the story that's going on. You're leading an actual rebellion. And in terms of gameplay, uh a lot of enemies are just threatening. They're not really threatening. They're not really lethal to your units, but they appear threatening, like such as uh enemies with high stats will be compensated with weak weapons, or enemies with low stats will be compensated with strong weapons. And I feel like that uh there's a little revolving dynamic in maps where you'll be presented with a challenge, like a think a chess challenge, and somewhere in the middle of the map, the challenge kind of changes. The phases changes, and you will have to adapt to the new situation. And I feel like that also paired with the massive amount of secrets and like multiple different ways you can play this game. There's so much variety in this game and so many ways to play it. And I've seen people like criticize this game saying like it's way too easy to abuse the mechanics or whatever. But like, I feel like those people misunderstand, like you are supposed to abuse the mechanics. That's once you figure out this game, it's not that hard to beat it on subsequent playthroughs or understand it. And I feel like that's the kind of feeling a strategy game should have. Okay, moving on to Metal Gear Solid 2. Uh, Probably the only overrated, pretentious pick on this list. But I do not like this game for its ending. Rather, I like this game for Kojima himself and how he put a lot of his own passions and his own autisms into this game, such as the Raiden. I really like Raiden as a protagonist, and I really like that Kojima kind of had Rose and Raiden's relationship based off of his own relationship, and I like how he was just experimenting with so many of his own ideas, what he wanted to do, rather than giving people the sequel they wanted to Metal Gear Solid 1 with Snake doing Snake things. Uh, I have kind of a Sakurai kind of mentality when it comes to sequels, in which I think there really shouldn't be sequels to things that can stand on their own. Uh, I wish Metal Gear Solid 2 was the end of the Metal Gear franchise, because after all that, clearly Kojima had little interest and it's very poorly written and stable together. But yeah, the stealth mechanics and all that, that's pretty good. It's all polished up and all that. Fate Extra. I love this game's writing. I love Natsu's writing. Natsu's writing is super good, except when it's not. And by that I mean I do not like Fate Stay Night or any of the Fate other franchises. But I do like Tsukihime. Tsukihime is written well too. But uh this is the only Fate related thing that follows through with the Holy Grail War. And I am pretty upset that no other Fate franchise really followed through, or if they did, and Apocrypha's case is just really bad and not really uh focusing on the Holy Grail War itself, but rather its characters. I think uh Natsu does kind of excel with character writing, but I think he needs something actively going on for the story to be gripping to me at least. This is my 3x3 after all. But besides that, the battle system in this, it's uh I have mixed feelings on it. On on one hand, it is pretty interesting that you, the player yourself, have to memorize. Oh yeah, memorization is a big part of this game, and you, the player yourself, have to memorize the enemy moves and what they do, and a lot of mental calculating. On the other hand, it makes for a really iffy RPG to play through and fight random encounters on. But I love replaying this game a lot just for Natsu's writing alone. The gameplay, uh, it could be bad. I probably still would play it, but Natsu's writing is carries this game and puts it on the 3x3. Xenoblade Chronicles X, or how to do an open world game properly and not screw it up. This game's world is massive, and there are so many interesting details and things to find and things to do. Uh, this game has more in line with the Xenogear and Xenosaga franchises rather than what Xenoblade Chronicles has become with 2 and 3. Uh, this is definitely a passion kind of project the director made. Uh, Probably the last ode to Xenogears that we're gonna get because Chronicles has eclipsed it and we're probably gonna get more. Uh, but I digress. Besides that, the battle system in this game, there's so many variety builds. There's mechs in this game. What is there not to like about open world and mechs? But things people don't like is the vagueness of it all. There's a vague story. The mechanics aren't really explained. It's explained very vaguely. There's there's so much the player doesn't get immediate access to. But uh, I feel like besides all that, it still is able to hold up besides all those vagueness, all the vagueness going on, because you have to experiment, especially in a society. We live in a society, especially in a during this abundance of open world games where people have been asking for just give them an open world game, let them just do whatever they want. I feel like Xenoblade Chronicles X delivers that, but it also has a kind of linearity to it so that the open worldness, so it doesn't fall into the pitfalls of an open world. You always have something you're striving for in the linear story. Oftentimes when you complete a story and you want to move on to the next, you can't because it blocks you off and tells you to do a couple of side objectives. But that's where the true gameplay of Xenoblade Chronicles X lies. When the game tells you to do these side objectives, the game is telling you to just explore the world, exhaust all possibilities until you can no longer really explore any further than that. Then you can go on the story because uh the story often has difficulty spikes, some pretty high difficulty spikes. And if you do the bare minimum and progress the story when you haven't really explored or done anything in the open world it provided you with, or done any side objectives, then you're gonna get uh blasted, I guess, for lack of a better term. Okay, Seventh Dragon. This is probably the only biased pick on this list. I find it weird, but not weird in the Earthbound sense, but weird in the sense that I didn't expect they would do that to me, or that I would do that to myself. This game was all about killing dragons, and killing dragons I did because I killed all of them. It's not required to kill all of them, but I did it anyway because it's like personal achievements, I guess. Uh, the I like this Seventh Dragon in comparison to Seventh Dragon 2020 or 2020, or no, not 2020, or Seventh Dragon 3, because it has an open world. And the open world is, I feel like the open world aspect really amplifies the invasion of dragons in this world. There's not much I could say about this. It's a typical RPG that you do RPG things and both dragons, and I killed them all. Final Fantasy X. The soundtrack of this game alone is enough to put it on any top 10 list. Okay, but getting into the the story is phenomenal. I love Final Fantasy because its fantasy story is always progressing with interesting ideas. It's always one-upping itself. You never know what you're gonna expect with a Final Fantasy game up to 13. And with 10, it really surpassed 7 in a sense. Not in terms of gameplay, but in story and probably aesthetic too. I really like the beach aesthetic. That is super creative. No other series has done that. The way the story is told through the first person narration of Tidus and how he perceives the world and all the events leading up to the revelation and up to the ending is amazing storytelling. Uh, Besides that, it's an RPG, and I really like RPGs. Moving on. Okay, Wild Arms 4. This almost didn't make the list because this was a pretty recent RPG that I played, but I like it a lot, and it made the list because it's so awesome. A Western RPG, Western slash sci-fi RPG. Wild Arms 4 in particular leans more into its sci-fi elements rather than the Western aesthetic that people know Wild Arms for. For oh my goodness. Because this game leans more into its sci-fi elements, it's allowed to do more creative things with its setting. Unfortunately, it lacks a coherent setting, and in turn, we're left with a RPG with a interesting battle system unique to it. The hexagonal battle system where you're on the hexagonal grid rather than four people lined up in a row. Despite this game, epic cutscenes and amazing music composed not by the composer of the series but by someone else they phoned in, the story of this game is mediocre, and the gameplay can be easily broken, but its boss battles and kind of gimmicky, very experimental RPG, since they were testing out new things to really make Wild Arms its own thing, makes this an interesting pick. I played Wild Arms 4, I mean not 4, 5, and in comparison, I really wasn't left with a good feeling because of the way Wild Arms 5 was presented. I still have to play Wild Arms 3, which people say is the best, along with 2. Wild Arms 4 might be removed off this list. Okay, last and definitely least, I almost forgot about this game, which is why I hastily put it in the two empty squares, in front of the two empty squares. Super Robot Wars, original generation, specifically on the Game Boy Advance, not the remake. I would rate this game the best SRPG of all time. Its characters, its mechanics, its story all flow each other well. This game is what a perfect ratio would look like. This game is what Fire Emblem should inspire to be. There are so many ways you can play this game, even more so than Thracia. The the story is so interesting because it's like a campy anime, but also with mechs. The mech designs are really interesting too. Well, not interesting, but super cool. The battles, the music, everything about this game is just top notch. And I think if anyone watching this video were to pick a game, it should be Super Robot Wars Original Generations because it never falters at all. There's never a dull moment in this game. Okay, below here we have the honorable mentions tab, which are games I enjoyed, but not enjoyed enough to replay them or really think about them in a complex way. Starting here, we have Fantasy Star Online 2. I love the action of this game. This game was the perfect MMORPG. I already did a video on it. I'm not gonna do another one, maybe, on NGS. But, uh, yeah, it's just super. The story sucked. The gameplay is the only reason I liked Fantasy Star Online 2. The story sucked, but I have my own personal story with the people I've met on that MMO. Uh, Continuing on, we have Ikaruga, which has amazing. I got goosebumps playing this game for the first time, and I haven't even heard of it. The soundtrack is amazing. The gameplay, even though it's hard and I can barely beat it, it's super engaging. It's fun, and then and got me into playing more shoot 'em ups. Seventh Dragon 2020. This game barely made the list, only because I didn't want to have two games in the same series on my 3x3. Uh, Story of 2020 is definitely a lot better and a lot more personal than DS, but DS wins over it because of the open world, and 2020 doesn't have an open world. 2020 is also super linear, in which the classes are cut down to a handful, and it's not really it's not really a game I fondly think about replaying because it's so linear as an RPG. But its battle system, I do love it a lot. In this game, dragons can have two turns, and I find that a really interesting dynamic for the mini boss FOEs in this game. Uh, every dragon encounter you have to think about, and every boss is uh kind of a puzzle. By the end of it, I didn't feel satisfied compared to Southern Dragon DS, but it was still an interesting RPG that I played. Okay, the Alliance Alive. I lost my save file in the middle of my playthrough for this game, and I can't really comment on the entirety of it. I lost it somewhere past the Rainbow Tower. Uh, but moving on from that, the opening section of this game is super good. I love the rainy world, but everything preceding the rainy world felt mediocre in comparison. Uh, that's all I have to say. Oh, also my favorite composer who composed Final Fantasy X, Masashi Hamauzu. He composed this game, and as always, I love his music. Unfortunately, there's only a few songs I like in Alliance Alive, so it doesn't make the list. And Tales of Vesperia. My history of this game is stupid, but the Tales of franchise I do like a lot, but the franchise is like the potato chips of RPGs, despite its really, really, really interesting, well, not interesting, its unique way of battling. I do like the idea of having a mixed RPG and kind of pseudo fighting game esque gameplay. But the story in Tales of Vesperia drags on like it is not a good story. The story drags on for way too long, and plot points are drawn out way too long. But the characters are uh they are good, but the story really brings this down, and it's not something I would want to replay. The Tales of games aren't RPGs that I would want to replay because of their stories tend to drag on for too long. But I do like comboing in this game, as with all Tales of games. Uh, that goes without saying. And I think that's it. Yeah.